Jasmine Crockett just ended Ilhan Omar's career with one line: watch her complete destruction. Open with a jarring power fact about political careers ending in a single moment, maybe just one sentence, one debate, one misstep, and how that parallels what just happened between Jasmine Crockett and Ilhan Omar. You're about to see how Jasmine Crockett may have just delivered the single line that reshapes Ilhan Omar's political future. Tease the biggest payoff: Crockett's brutal clapback that some say ended Omar's credibility in one strike. Pose a challenge-style question. Have you ever seen someone lose an argument in a single sentence? Drop the sharpest one-liner you've ever heard in the comments. Imagine two rising stars orbiting the same political space, bound to collide sooner or later. Jasmine Crockett, known for her sharp tongue and laser-focused jabs, has been building a reputation as one of Congress's most unflinching fighters. On the other side stands Ilhan Omar, already famous, deeply polarizing, and accustomed to being both a lightning rod and a rallying point for progressives. When two strong forces locked in different orbits finally crash, the sparks aren't accidental, they're inevitable. This was never just about one-off words in the heat of a congressional exchange. It was about years of simmering tension within a wing of the party, between those who position themselves as unapologetic disruptors and those who brand themselves as no-nonsense truth-tellers. Crockett had been gaining momentum steadily, her voice carrying further with each headline moment. Omar, meanwhile, had settled into the role of being both influential and controversial, often weathering storms that would have sunk lesser politicians. But storms take a toll, and one perfectly timed strike, one brilliantly packaged line, doesn't just create a viral moment. It opens the floodgates for reputations to shift. In politics, rivalries matter almost as much as ideologies. People remember showdowns more than policy papers, and when two figures draw opposite audiences, one hungry for fresh sound bites, the other tied to established expectations, the clash is destined to shape the narrative far beyond the chamber. What matters most is this: iconic careers don't unravel in marathon debates. They often pivot on seconds. Crockett knew how to seize that leverage. Omar misread the moment, and the result is a setup for one of 2025's most unforgettable confrontations. Sometimes it's not the length of a speech that matters, it's the precision of a single strike. Jasmine Crockett managed in just one sentence what endless debates rarely achieve. She made the room stop cold. Her line wasn't dripping with jargon or buried in a paragraph of committee speak. It was sharp, concise, and delivered with the kind of confidence that leaves no room for rebuttal. The moment the words landed, you could actually feel a shift, like the air was suddenly electric and the balance of the argument tipped instantly. Why did that line cut so deep? Because it wasn't just about Omar's politics, it was about perception. Crockett took Omar's known vulnerabilities and reframed them in less than 10 words, transforming political critique into personal brand damage. The force behind it wasn't only in content, it was in delivery. Omar attempted a response, but as political theater goes, she was already on the defensive. And in today's political arena, the first perception often becomes the permanent memory. Think about it. Across history, the lines that stick tend to be razor-sharp, not long-winded. Ronald Reagan disarmed an opponent with humor in under 15 seconds. Barack Obama once shifted an entire campaign trajectory with a single phrase. Crockett tapped into that same tradition of rhetorical efficiency. One line, dual effects, it elevated her while simultaneously undercutting Omar. That's the paradoxical beauty and brutality of politics in the viral age. Why did this single moment explode far beyond the walls of Congress? Because politics in the modern era thrives less on lengthy policy arguments and more on emotional resonance. Viewers weren't tuning in to dissect legislative nuance. They were watching for who could command the room. Jasmine Crockett's line didn't just sting, it tapped into a cultural appetite for authenticity, bluntness, and decisive punches. That's what turned it from a sharp soundbite into a symbol. For younger voters especially, the moment had a different flavor. They've grown tired of canned talking points, endless filibusters, and speech-making that feels detached from real life. To them, Crockett's unflinching delivery looked like courage, even if they didn't agree with every part of her platform. Omar, who once embodied that same sense of raw disruption, suddenly looked outmaneuvered. Her reaction painted the image of a veteran trying to relive a playbook that no longer worked. Simply put, Crockett came across as fresher, sharper, and more aligned with the times. But resonance isn't only about style, it's about timing. The nation has been restless, frustrated by dysfunction, and constantly searching for leaders who can say what they mean without hesitating. Crockett's one-liner scratched that public itch at the exact right moment. It wasn't rehearsed, but it felt deliberate. That's the sweet spot. Picture two boxers with completely different styles. One charges forward with relentless energy, the other relies on footwork and strategy. That's Jasmine Crockett and Ilhan Omar in the political arena. Crockett thrives on blunt force, her interruptions, her directness, her unapologetic tone. She talks like someone who expects to win the exchange before it even begins. Omar, in contrast, has always leaned on framing herself as thoughtful, deliberate, even morally superior. She draws on conviction, not confrontation. But when conviction meets bluntness, audiences instinctively lean toward the sharper blade. This is where conflict becomes chemistry. Crockett's style appeals to those who see politics as a matter of grit. Say it plain, say it loud, don't sugarcoat. Omar's demeanor, while powerful in its own right, has at times come across as intellectualized, even aloof. That difference feeds directly into public perception. On a viral stage, Crockett looks raw and real. Omar risks looking rehearsed and guarded. And in soundbite culture, charisma often defeats caution. The irony? Both women rose to prominence by embracing their outsider status, yet their paths diverged. Crockett seized momentum through combative showdowns. Omar sought long-term influence through ideology. When forceful immediacy collides with calculated longevity, the short game often steals the win. When a political clash is this loud, the shockwaves don't stay confined to the chamber. They ripple straight into the party's inner corridors. After Crockett's one-liner reverberated online, the whispers began immediately. Some strategists within the Democratic Party saw it as fresh energy, a rising voice unafraid to call things as she sees them. Others, especially longtime allies of Ilhan Omar, viewed it as dangerous, an unnecessary fracture that could deepen already fragile unity. In politics, whether you land the punch or absorb it, the fallout is never just personal, it's collective. For the progressive bloc, Omar has been both symbol and spearhead. Crockett's attack created uncomfortable questions. Is Omar still the movement's sharpest champion, or has she lost momentum to a newer contender? Suddenly, those conversations weren't happening in public rallies. They were happening in side rooms, on late-night phone calls, and in the cautious phrasing of journalists framing the story. The perception of strength matters as much as actual votes, and Omar's aura of untouchability cracked, even if just slightly. Meanwhile, Crockett found new doors opening. Invitations to panels, fundraising events, collabs with key committees, all accelerated overnight. What might feel like a quick zinger inside Congress reshapes reputations outside it. Supporters want to back winners, and at that moment, Crockett looked like the one carrying momentum. Moments in politics don't just live where they happen, they live in the echo chamber of media. And the instant Crockett's remark landed, media outlets seized it like wildfire. Cable news panels ran the clip repeatedly, each anchor giving their own spin. Some treated it as a career-defining comeback for Crockett, others framed it as a brutal humiliation for Omar. The clip wasn't just played, it was dissected, slowed down, and replayed until it became less of a moment and more of a story. That's the unique power of media amplification. It doesn't just record reality, it reshapes it. The more the clip aired, the more viewers assumed it was the turning point. By midweek, outlets from left-leaning opinion shows to right-wing commentators were all looping the same footage, though each pulled their own message from it. To supporters of Crockett, media coverage validated their excitement. To Omar's base, it felt like an intentional pile-on. Still, the repetition made it nearly impossible to ignore. Once an exchange is played enough, it morphs from news to narrative, and that's where the legacy is cemented. Political fights aren't just won in the chamber. They're won on the evening news, in podcasts, and in headlines that travel across millions of screens. Media doesn't just amplify, it cements reputations, either polisher or tarnisher. If traditional media poured gasoline on the fire, social media lit the match that made it explode worldwide. Within hours of Crockett's line, clips flooded TikTok, Instagram Reels, and X posts, racking up millions of views. Users weren't just sharing the video, they were remixing it, turning it into memes, adding reaction clips, layering it with trending audio. What started as a congressional exchange became a cultural event. And here's the kicker. In the viral era, memes often travel faster than context. Hashtags like #CrockettClapback and #OmarOver trended simultaneously, each framing the moment in dramatic terms. Supporters of Crockett framed it as the arrival of a fearless new political star, while Omar's loyal defenders scrambled to reclaim the narrative, posting threads about her record and highlighting moments where she'd come out on top. But in the attention economy, length loses to laughs, and memes beat essays almost every time. The digital storm didn't just lock in perceptions. It turned into a scoreboard. Comments flooded with W or L reactions, turning the exchange into a sport where people voted in real time on who won and who lost. And once voters decide emotionally, changing their minds later is nearly impossible. Social media doesn't just reflect public sentiment, it cages it, molds it, and hands it back as faux consensus. History has a funny way of reminding us that sometimes politics turns not on policy but on a single quip. Think about the 1960 Kennedy-Nixon debates. Nixon argued hard policy, but Kennedy's poised presence on television, with a few short, confident lines, swayed the country. Or take Ronald Reagan in 1984, when with one witty sentence about his age, he completely disarmed concerns from critics and audiences who thought he might be too old. In both cases, long arguments faded, a single phrase became immortal. Jasmine Crockett's one-liner fits right into this long tradition of verbal kill shots. What she did mirrors a blueprint visible across decades: deliver a line that redefines the opponent in seconds. Omar, in this moment, became the player reacting instead of the one controlling the stage. And just like history, perception calcified instantly. Decades later, students of politics don't revisit the full debates of Kennedy or Reagan. They revisit that single pivot that changed everything. This is how leadership reputations are cemented, not in full speeches, rarely in position papers, hardly ever in detailed committee hearings. They're shaped in seconds, when lines slice sharper than any document. Crockett tapped into that formula, knowingly or not, and etched her name into a lineage of politicians who understood one reality: audiences don't remember paragraphs, they remember punches. Challenge-driven. If you want more breakdowns of viral political takedowns like this, hit subscribe and join us weekly. No echo chambers, just brutal facts and sharp storytelling. When the dust settles after a viral clash, the first to cast their verdict are always the supporters. Jasmine Crockett's base roared with approval. Online communities flooded timelines with celebratory memes, framing her as the fighter who finally spoke truth to power. For her backers, the moment was validation that their champion wasn't just articulate but battle-tested. Each like, share, and comment carried the energy of a movement that suddenly felt like it had momentum on its side. Energy is contagious, and Crockett's camp had it in spades. On the flip side, Omar's supporters were left grappling with an awkward dilemma: how to defend someone who looked like they'd been publicly outmaneuvered. Many rallied to contextualize the clip, arguing that years of Omar's leadership couldn't be undermined by a single exchange. Others doubled down, launching counterclips and reminders of Omar's past victories. But in politics, perception often moves faster than defense. The longer it takes to frame a counter-narrative, the less likely it is to stick. Omar's supporters worked overtime, yet the tone felt reactive instead of proactive. And here lies the lesson: supporters can amplify, but they can't erase. Crockett's base basked in triumph. Omar's base scrambled for control. When one side celebrates and the other explains, the scoreboard is already speaking. Inside every political party, unity is less about harmony and more about management. The Crockett-Omar clash didn't just stay viral. It exposed deep fractures already simmering within Democratic ranks. On one side, progressives who revered Omar as a fearless pioneer saw Crockett's strike as fratricide, an unnecessary airing of family disputes in public. On the other, a newer wave of members and strategists celebrated Crockett's directness, believing her style represents a sharper, more relatable version of progressive politics. The clash sharpened a debate that had been bubbling quietly for years. Should the Democratic Party lean into uncompromising ideology or pivot toward leaders who thrive in the performance-driven era of politics? Omar had once been the model for speaking truth to power, but Crockett's viral moment suggested a torch was being passed, even if unofficially. That was enough to unsettle loyalties. Behind closed doors, this translated into awkward strategy sessions. Leaders suddenly had to manage not just external opposition but internal narratives of generational shift. And the danger is clear. When a party fights itself, opponents rarely need to intervene. When pundits and political analysts weigh in, they don't just describe, they define. The Crockett-Omar exchange quickly became a hot topic on talk shows and op-eds, with commentators split on its significance. Some argued it was little more than a flashy soundbite, a viral blip that will fade as quickly as it arrived. Others insisted that Crockett's precision marked the kind of rhetorical breakthrough that reshapes careers. Both perspectives matter, because in politics, expert framing often influences how the public remembers events. One analyst compared the moment to a brand reset for each woman. Crockett emerging as a fearless disruptor, Omar scrutinized as a leader who may have lost her edge. Another strategist bluntly said, "Perception is permanence in politics," underscoring how quickly images lock in once amplified. Even neutral observers admitted Crockett won the day, which, strategically, is often all it takes. The divided expert takes highlight the paradox. One line doesn't guarantee long-term career shifts, but it absolutely seeds them. And in today's cycle, seeds grow faster when analysts water them with constant repetition. Why do moments like Crockett's one-liner feel so addictive to watch? The answer isn't just political, it's psychological. Humans are wired to respond to conflict, and when we see a clear verbal knockout, our brains register it almost like witnessing a sporting win. There's a release of dopamine, a little hit of satisfaction when someone decisively dominates an exchange. That's why people replay the clip again and again. It taps into our craving for resolution and clarity in a messy, uncertain world. Political debates are often long, nuanced, and complex, but our minds prefer shortcuts. A single, sharp line reduces the noise into something bite-sized and emotionally satisfying. Crockett's strike compressed years of tension into a moment that felt clean and decisive. For supporters watching, it wasn't just a win for her. It felt like a personal victory they shared. That sense of identification makes audiences even more loyal. On the other side, Omar's stumble triggered the opposite response: discomfort, secondhand embarrassment, even frustration. Once attached, those emotions linger longer than facts. That's why one moment can stick for years, even if policy details fade within weeks. Every knockout carries a hidden risk: overexposure. While Crockett's one-liner energized her supporters, political punches often cut both ways. Some viewers loved her fire, but others accused her of grandstanding or punching left when the party already faces external battles. What looks like fearless authenticity to one audience can appear as divisive opportunism to another, and that duality is where viral fame becomes unpredictable. History is littered with examples where the attacker briefly won the spotlight but later faced backlash for tone. A sharp dig that seems powerful in the moment can later be reframed as disrespectful, unprofessional, or too personal, especially when voters want unity. Omar's allies have already begun using this angle, suggesting Crockett's takedown weakened not just Omar but the cause they both supposedly champion. Ironically, the same moment that elevated Crockett could be weaponized to question her judgment down the line. The paradox of political combat is this: short-term victories don't guarantee long-term gain. Crockett owns the headlines now, but maintaining that momentum requires balancing sharpness with vision. Voters might cheer a fighter, but they also want a builder. Campaigns are built on repetition, and nothing repeats better than a viral clip. You can already imagine how Crockett's one-liner will echo on the 2026 campaign trail. Supporters will splice it into ads, use it as a rallying cry at fundraisers, and remind voters that Crockett isn't just a participant in Congress, she's a fighter who lands blows. That single clip could anchor entire campaign narratives because it crystallizes an image better than policy pamphlets ever could. For Omar, the danger is equally clear. Opponents, both inside primaries and from the other party, will recycle the footage to suggest she's weakened. No matter what legislative wins she racks up, challengers can loop that moment and frame her as the politician who lost control in public. Political campaigns thrive on contrast, and no ad strategist will miss the opportunity to showcase Crockett's calm dominance versus Omar's defensive posture. The broader effect is strategic too. Parties start to decide which figures feel future-ready, and high-velocity clips influence those perceptions disproportionately. Crockett suddenly looks like rising stock. Omar risks the label of fading brand. Every political stumble sparks the question, what if? In Omar's case, the fallout wasn't just caused by Crockett's sharpness, it was worsened by her own reaction. Instead of pivoting, disarming with humor, or choosing silence, Omar leaned into defensiveness. That gave Crockett's line more oxygen and cemented the perception of imbalance. In politics, silence can sometimes be stronger than speech. One alternative? Humor. History shows that diffusing a barb with wit often earns respect and buys breathing room. Reagan neutralized age questions not with anger, but with a joke that flipped the narrative instantly. If Omar had leaned playfully into Crockett's line, or at least brushed it off, viewers may have remembered resilience rather than retreat. Another option? Pivot. Instead of defending, redirect with a bigger point, pulling attention away from the insult and steering it into a broader win. Politicians who can pivot own the frame, even if the jab lands. The final lesson is composure. Appearing rattled magnifies attack lines. By holding steady, you deny the attacker the reaction victory that makes their moment viral. Even without a strong comeback, calm detachment can dull the sharpest blow. One viral moment doesn't just change a narrative, it can catapult a career. For Jasmine Crockett, her takedown of Omar instantly positioned her as more than just a powerful voice in her district. Overnight, she became a national figure whose name recognition jumped miles beyond her previous reach. Political insiders know this pattern well. First you dominate a room, then you dominate the headlines, and soon enough, you dominate donor lists. The transformation was visible immediately. Invitations to speak on major networks poured in, grassroots fundraising saw spikes, and Crockett became the newest face to watch in Democratic politics. To the public, she appeared not just bold, but fearless, someone not afraid to confront even highly established figures within her own ranks. That kind of courage translates into credibility. And in an age where attention equals capital, both political and financial, Crockett suddenly had momentum others would envy. But it's not just about visibility, it's about identity. Crockett's moment crystallized her brand, the fighter, the disruptor, the quick-witted breaker of stale narratives. That's what cements future power. Because voters don't just elect resumes, they elect personalities. Virality is a double-edged sword. The same spotlight that propels someone upward can just as easily burn them if it lingers too long. For Jasmine Crockett, the danger now isn't obscurity, it's overexposure. Voters love a fighter, but if every appearance becomes a takedown, critics will frame her as combative instead of constructive. That line between fearless and reckless is razor thin, and opponents will eagerly exploit it. Already, whispers in establishment circles suggest that Crockett risks becoming a soundbite politician, loud in the moment but lacking the steady leadership image needed for higher office. The danger isn't the line she delivered, it's being defined only by that line. If she leans too heavily on her viral moment, adversaries will craft a caricature, the congresswoman who can clap back but can't build coalitions. The irony is stark. What made Crockett rise, her bluntness, could also box her in. Unless carefully balanced with policy depth, she risks peaking fast and leaving room for others to paint her as style over substance. In politics, virality is fuel, but it burns fast if not harnessed wisely. When the noise of headlines fades and social feeds move on, what truly remains are the lessons etched into memory. Jasmine Crockett's one-liner proved a timeless truth. In politics, a single sentence can define perception more than years of legislation. Yet it also showed that moments are not destiny, they are accelerants. They light the fire, but leaders must decide how to tend that flame. Crockett demonstrated how precision and timing can supercharge a career. Omar, in contrast, revealed how one slip in composure can unravel years of carefully built credibility. Neither outcome is permanent, but both underline the razor-thin margins on which modern politics operates. One line can be remembered for a season or for a generation, depending on how each player handles the aftermath. For Crockett, the opportunity is enormous to transform her viral energy into long-term influence. For Omar, the challenge is equally clear: to reclaim narrative strength by demonstrating resilience, not reaction. In the end, this isn't just their story, it's a broader warning to every leader in the spotlight. And if you thought that was brutal, wait until you hear how another political figure lost an entire campaign in under 60 seconds coming up next video.